Hi everyone and welcome to Nick BC Wildlife. So in this video we are going to be looking at my local area of Fleet in Hampshire. We'll also have a look at a place called Miller's Wood and a little bit of Thursley Common as well. So I live right on the Hampshire-Surrey border in a place called Fleet in the United Kingdom. And I live about 100 metres away from Fleet Pond Nature Reserve, which is a big nature reserve of about 160 acres of woodland, and it's a mix of evergreen and deciduous woodland. There's an 80-acre lake which is man-made, so I believe that's why it has to be called a pond, so that's Fleet Pond itself. But there is some natural streams that run down to the pond, and then there's some open grassland, meadowland areas as well. So because of that, we get foxes, badgers, deer, a couple of different types of snake. We get lots of different ducks, grebes, swan, geese, kingfisher, nuthatch, all the woodpeckers, different songbirds, and then on the meadow you get things like greater whitethroat, stonechat, and thrushes at the moment as well. So it's a really amazing place. It's lovely to go for a walk anyway. I particularly like that type of wildlife photography, the kind of opportunistic walk around a woodland, see what you can find type photography. But because we've got the big section of water there, you get such a great selection of birds to photograph. It's really nice, and of course it's very convenient for me too. So the other place I go to quite often is about a 20-minute drive from my house. It's called Thursley Common, and that's quite a different landscape. It's got a lot more sort of gorse in areas, still got the woodland areas, but there's some sort of marshlandy type lowland area too. So you've got things like curlew there, hobby, taking dragonflies off the small sections of water that they've got. There are lots of linnet and Dartford warbler and so on. So it's an absolutely fabulous place. I love Thursley. It's got a place in my heart forever, I think, pretty much. And then I'm going to show you a little bit of Miller's Wood. So Miller's Wood is actually over in West Sussex, and it's run by a chap called John Stanton. So John's a really, really lovely guy. He's an excellent wildlife photographer himself. And he bought Miller's Wood with a dream to set up a much more natural environment for a hide day experience. So he's made all of the hides out of wood from the local area. They blend in really nicely to the environment. I think there's 4 hides in total, and he's done an absolutely fabulous job. A couple of the hides can take 2 or 3 people, and you can book a hide day experience, or you can book tuition with John if you're just starting out on your wildlife journey, so he'll offer you that too. And he's got different setups, but one of the things I think that makes his setup stand out a little bit more from other hide days is that he's also tried to encourage different birds in that are berry eating birds, because he's grown and selected berry bearing plants to plant in the local area too. So you've got feeder stations, and the feeder stations will have sort of all the usual songbirds come to them, nuthatch as well, but the berries will attract things like the bullfinch and thrushes and so on. So you really do get quite a nice varied amount of birds at Miller's Wood. It's fantastic. The other thing that John has is a small pond, and the pond, he's very lucky, does get quite a few kingfishers show up to the pond. So they, compared to other setups, again, it's much more natural. It's just a pond. There are some perches, so the kingfishers will come to the perches generally to fish, but they may also then take the fish to the trees in the surrounding area to dispatch. And part of the reason for that is if the branch that they're on is too flimsy, they can't actually knock out the fish on the branch itself, so they'll fly off to a sort of more sturdy branch to do that aspect of it. And so what's quite nice is that you'll see the kingfisher catch a fish, and then it may fly off to another perch up in a tree somewhere, and you get slightly different shots that way. And I think it just looks a bit more natural. I don't like the whole baiting approach to wildlife photography, so I actually think that John's done an absolutely brilliant job of making it look as natural as possible, because it essentially is. you're just able to get closer because you're in a hide, which is brilliant. And that's the nature of photography for me. I think it should be about letting nature take its place and not trying to get in the way too much with it, in my opinion. So then we'll look at some editing as well. So I've got DxO Photolab 9, which I use exclusively now for all my wildlife editing. We'll have a little look at how I set up some presets on that, and how that saves me an awful lot of time with my photo editing. And then we will look at the Nik Collection 9 with the output sharpening to show how I use it to bring slightly out of focus images back into focus. It won't work with anything more than a very minor, almost pin sharp image, but I don't think it's worth trying to save an image that, unless it's something really, really rare, I don't think it's ever really worth trying to run something through software to try and make it look like it's back in focus again. It just never really looks great. And case in point with that, I think, would be Topaz Photo AI, and when it was a standalone program as well, Sharpen AI. I think when it first came out, like everyone else, I was bowled over at some of what it could achieve, but actually when you look at it closely, those images really aren't good for anything other than social media, because if you try to print it, there's too much artifacting and over sharpening from Photo AI. Even if you tweak it, I don't think it does a particularly great job. So we'll look at Nik Collection 9, because actually I think it does a really good job, and it looks quite natural. So we'll have a look at that, and with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. The first part is going to be a bit of a montage of the birds that I've managed to find on my travels over the last few months, and then it will be into the editing section. So I'll try and put some place markers for those, and then you'll have the chapters and you can skip through as you like. So I hope you enjoy the video, and if you do, please do like and subscribe. This channel is still in its infancy, and I'm really trying to grow it, so any support would be really gratefully received. Thanks very much. Okay, so here we are in DxO Photolab 9 Elite, and I just wanted to show you a couple of things about how I edit the photos and why I think presets can be quite useful as well. So this is a lovely photo of a Dartford warbler that I took in Thursley a couple of days ago, and this is actually a DNG file that has been processed already through DxO Pure Raw 6, and I used Deep Prime XT3 for X-Trans. Well, it's all in one now. There's no X-Trans or Bayer separation, but the file here has essentially no color detail when you first open it up. You have to, as with all raw files, edit the image to get it to look like what you saw on the day, or whatever you particularly want it to look like, I suppose. So I've applied Velvia here, which is a color profile from the Fuji cameras, which boosts a lot of different colors, particularly greens, blues, reds and yellows, and it applies quite a lot of saturation and extra vibrancy to those colors, and just overall as well within the image, plus a lot of extra contrast and some sharpening. So I like Velvia, but for wildlife it does look a little bit over the top, and to be fair, this doesn't look that natural. It's a nice starting point, but I would normally have to open my RAW file, select the Velvia color rendering profile from under this section here, which is color and black and white rendering on the left hand side, and where it says Velvia in vivid, I'd select that, and this is what would come up essentially. What you can do though is you can create a preset that works with the DNG files that come out of Pure Raw, and will get you most of the way to looking like Velvia, but without overdoing it. So I would have to bring back saturation, as I say, in particular, but also a bit of contrast on Velvia files. So what I can do instead is I can select my preset over here, click apply, and it gives me, if I just reframe it for you, it gives me a very similar color boost. So greens, blues, yellows here as well, and to an extent reds are boosted, particularly around the eye there, you can see, and the bird. But it's not overdone, so I've actually subdued this slightly compared to Velvia, and it's also got less overall sharpening and contrast. So what I've done to create this is I've gone to spot weighted for my DxO smart lighting, and I use the tool here to give me, I've got 3 different resizable sections that we can put over different parts of the bird. So you might want to put this one over the white section of feathering there, perhaps resize this to the size of the bird's head and just put it over the head of the bird, and then this larger one here I'd put over the main body of the bird. So with all of those applied to the bird itself, we're now getting a intensity slider underneath DxO smart lighting, which is basically trying to adjust the intensity of the smart lighting based on just those spots within the image, so essentially our subject. So I think the lighting there now looks really good for the bird. The eye is nicely lit, head's nicely lit. We've got a little bit of shadow detail here, which creates a little bit more realistic looking image overall. And then from that I apply DxO Clearview Plus with an intensity of 10, which again gives you the same pop in colours and contrast that you would get from Velvia. But I think it's too much in this particular image, so I'll drop it back to 5. And then contrast is set to 10, micro contrast 10, and fine contrast 5. But you might want to adjust those. Micro contrast and fine contrast are the 2 that I would typically adjust, because they are the ones that affect the kind of crispiness, if you like, of the feather detail in a bird. So I've just brought micro contrast back by 3 to 7 from 10. Then if we carry on, we've got white balance, which is currently as shot. You could select the color picker here and just select the slightly whiter section of the feathering on the chest there, and that will fairly dramatically change the color profile of the image there. but actually that is much more in keeping with the coloration of a Dartford warbler, so I think that's pretty accurate there. And you can obviously adjust this yourself as well if you want to, but I think, to be fair, DxO Photolab 9 has done a really good job there. What I've chosen in terms of color rendering is camera body and then Fuji X-E2 all the way through all the different models. So this image was taken on the X-H2S, but that rendering also applies to the X-T5 too, so it's just a one for all type rendering. So just leave that as it is. And then this one, the HSL tool, we've done quite a lot of adjustment here. So overall saturation and vibrancy have changed quite dramatically. It's saturation boost of 25 and vibrancy all the way up to 40. It may be a little bit too much for your liking in some ways, but the reason it doesn't look too overdone is because we've made adjustments as well to specific colours. So we've got reds here. Saturation boost of reds has gone up by 10, but the luminancy's gone down by 5, so you don't get that horrible glaring in the red. So you can see here around the eye we haven't lost detail because we've oversaturated reds there. Yellows are also boosted in the Velvia colour profile, so that would be this kind of like twigs here, and you can see the lines in the background. Those are have a lot of yellow in them. Some of the areas around this section of the tree, the pine that this bird's on, are also yellow. And so the saturation of that's been boosted, luminancy's been brought back quite a bit because yellows, again, like reds, if you oversaturate them, you just lose all the detail in them. Greens I've boosted to 25, so that's made the pine needles and any greenery behind look a lot nicer, in my opinion. But the luminancy you drop back, so again you're getting that nice rich texture rather than a bright green. And then blue, saturation up by 15, so this improves sky detail, as you can see in the background there, and luminancy down by 10, so minus 10. This also richens sky blues and I think makes a nice punchy image. This is particularly good for social media, but you may want to dial these down a little bit if you're going to print it. So from there we can scroll past all of this. This is all the local adjustment I should say, and then we've got my water marking and things like framework and so on. Unchop mask I've turned off, and that's it actually really for this image. So that preset with all of those things selected can then be made into something that I can use over and over again. So the way to do that is on the preset editor, there's a little box down here which has a plus in the bottom right hand corner of it. If you click that, it'll allow you to create a new preset from what you've just created on the left hand side there in the different adjustment functions, and then you can rename it whatever you want. So I've got one over here called For YouTube Less Contrast and Boost, which is color boost. PR stands for Pure Raw, so I know that this is one that I can apply to my DNG files that have been through Pure Raw. For YouTube just means that I've selected a 16:9 aspect ratio for my crop, and for these images I don't tend to put my watermark or my frame on it either, because I'm not uploading it to social media. I want it to be part of a video essentially. So that's just explaining how I use presets. I think it's a really valuable tool, and it saves me an awful lot of time in my photo editing. So if I went to the next image along now, I can select the same preset, click apply, and there we go. Almost in an instant we've got an image which looks very similar to the last image we were using. Okay, so here we are back with the original image we were looking at of the Dartford warbler, and I just wanted to go over how I would edit my image now in Photolab 9. So having run it through Pure Raw 6, I'd open up the folder, go to Customize in Photolab 9, and then select whichever is the relevant preset that I've made. So some of them are for Instagram, and that's mainly just a different cropping. So for YouTube, I use a crop that gives me a 16:9 aspect ratio and a size of crop that is the same as a 4K video file. So let's say that's the crop that I wanted for this image. Having selected my preset, I then select the tool for smart lighting, place it over the bird in the relevant places that we showed before. So I'll just quickly do this and then click close. Once I've got the full size image again, I'd select the intensity slider, get it to roughly where I want it, which might be that, and that's pretty much my edit done now. Now obviously with different images you might want to reduce contrast and so on, as I said before. With this image I'm fairly happy with how it looks, and just to be a little bit expeditious with the rest of the video, we'll leave it at that. So local adjustments, then I would click add, click AI mask, make sure that I've got the plus selector, and then hover over the background there. In doing that, it has selected the background pretty well, but there's a couple of areas like the beak here where it's overlapping. So if I click the minus selector, go over to the beak of the bird, select that. I will just select the body again to make sure it hasn't selected that. And you can do the same for any of the foliage too. So there we go, that's deselected all of those. You can also use a little bit of diffusion, so I might go to like 7 on the diffusion, and then I would select micro contrast and bring that down, and that will blur the background slightly without giving it an unnatural look to the image. So from there as well, another way to achieve slightly better separation between the subject and the background is to just brighten the background slightly. So I'll bring the shadows and midtones up, and then I can also adjust the blur intensity of that mask, and I'll probably bring that up to just +5, because too much blur really starts to look a bit too unnatural. And I find that that's one of the things that I can notice quite quickly if people have been using Lightroom to edit their images, and Lightroom's blur tool, it just doesn't look right, particularly if the photo was taken on something like a micro four thirds camera. You just know instantly that it's fake. So that is an image that I would say is not far off where I want it to be. Now if I wasn't putting this on a YouTube video, or perhaps if I was and I just wanted to make sure that people knew this was a still image for whatever reason, you could put a frame to it, which I always feel looks nice, and then I would put my watermark on the image if I was going to be putting it onto Instagram, that sort of thing. Okay, so we aren't going to be using this one for Instagram, and so I've removed the frame and the signature. What I would then like to just show you is the Nick Collection output sharpener. Because the eye of this bird is slightly soft, you can see that probably just around here in particular. It's not bad, but it could be better. So if we go to the output sharpener, when it first opens, it's on a default set of parameters, and it just looks pretty awful, to be honest. This is a very sharp image anyway, and that is just completely over sharpened and looks pretty awful and not very realistic at all. So what I would do is I'd take adaptive sharpening down from 50% to closer to 10, maybe 15. Let's go with 13, that's fine. Output sharpening we'll leave as it is at the moment, and then I'll probably bring the focus up. So I'm going to put that to about 70%-ish. There we go. Now, this is the original image. If I select the slider and bring it across, that's the new sharpened image. Now for me, that's probably still a tiny bit over sharpened. So I'll bring the focus back slightly, 65. The eye still looks really good now, that's much sharper, and everything else looks quite natural. I'll just bring this across so you can see again. Just a bit softer, particularly around the eye, and that's sharpened up nicely without overdoing it. Now, the other thing we can do here is add local adjustment, go to depth mask and do my little trick that I've shown you before where we select the bird. So let's do that. I'll just slide this slider all the way across so we can see what it's actually picking out here. And then we can go to this slider over here. So under mask options there is the actual depth field. If I slide this all the way across to the side with the flower on it, that brings everything that's close to the camera in focus. Or pardon me, not in focus, into the mask I should say. So we've got all of the perch and most of that background foliage there, and nearly all of the bird as well. The background itself isn't selected, which is what we want. I do need a little bit more of the foliage to be selected, so I'm going to use this graduation slider, which is the bottom one of these two. So there's a top one and a bottom one. The top one moves, I would say, like the exact position of where you want the mask, the depth mask, to stop, and the other one produces a sort of graduated filter, if you like. So we've got all of the bird selected, all of the perch selected, and most of that foliage now, so I think that's pretty good. If we then invert that mask, we should have, yeah, the background selected, and the bird and the perch and so on are now not part of the mask. If I then bring focus back, structure back, local contrast back, and we can leave output sharpening as it is, then the bird remains sharp, the perch remains sharp, all the foliage remains sharp, but the background is smoothed even further compared to what we had when we just used Photolab 9. If I then click apply, it's going to process the image, and we can go back to Photolab 9 and click on the TIFF, and there is the final image with the bird slightly more sharpened, the perch a little bit more sharpened, and the background a little bit more blurred. So if I click on the DNG file next to it, that's what we had, especially around here if you look at this section, and now it's quite a bit smoother without overdoing it. What I can now do is, if we decided actually I do want to put the frame on there, I can still do that, even with the TIFF file. I probably want to reduce the size of the frame to 0. I don't like too big a frame. And then I can also put my watermarking on and put my signature back at the top there. So if that was the final image I was happy with, the bird now popping out of the image quite nicely but without looking too fake. And I can export that for my use on, I'm just going to go standard and we'll go enable resizing off, because I'm happy with that for YouTube. So that's now exporting that file, and we can use it for my YouTube video.